Welcome to Open Up Relationships. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We regularly upload high-quality videos. You can like this video to support the channel. r/surviving infidelity. My 2 years of wife cheated with my best friend, and I caught her red-handed. My wife and I had a wonderful courtship. I felt as though we had so much in common. I was the happiest man on earth. Then a couple of months after we got married, everything changed. My sister got married, and my wife's feelings were hurt as she was not invited to be in the wedding. Shortly after, my wife told me that she overheard my mother telling some of the other wedding party that she was just a gold digger, not very pretty, and definitely not good enough for her son. It has been a living hell ever since, a full-blown competition to see who can hate the other more. My wife all but stopped having sex with me because she was mad at my mother. Our entire first year of marriage, we had sex only 4 times. She says it was because I didn't stick up for her enough, but I was doing my best to keep what semblance of peace I could between wife and extended family. Well, as you can probably imagine, as a man in my late 20s who was constantly arguing, she said, between my wife and parents, barely getting any action at home, and surrounded by attractive females at my job, I started fantasizing about a different life. Over the next few years, I had 2 one-night stands, and would eventually have to meet that reckoning. My wife wanted to start a family, and I was more than eager. I had always wanted kids, and in some twisted way also probably hoped it would cement our marriage. We had 2 wonderful little girls, 2 years apart. Then one Mother's Day, I lost it. I had invited my mother to come over to our house, where she and my wife began attempting to out-disrespect the other, another pissing contest to see who had more control over me, and whose side I would take, and a huge argument ensued between them. I remember tears, feeling helpless and trapped, and briefly contemplating blowing my brains out just to end it all. Quickly, my love for my kids grasped me from my self-pity tantrum. I thought of Nietzsche and being a man for a change, and I decided right then, and there I was just finished. Over the course of the next week, I found an apartment and had one of my best friends help me move an adequate portion of our furniture there. Total waste of money, because I usually came back home to sleep with my kids at night anyway, but in my mind, I was getting the ball rolling. My wife was completely shocked, begging my friend to convince me to come back. She even started seeing a counselor to work on her issues with my mom. They actually attempted to mend fences, and my mother says that period was the nicest she has ever been. I had been low-level flirtatious with a pretty young woman at work, and I instantly ramped it up. We started emailing, flirting more at work, very stupid, and actually made out a couple of times. Then my wife discovered the emails. Now the ultimatum was thrown back at me. My girls were young, and I knew I would them dearly. The thought of another man possibly moving in and living around my sweet innocent little girls also petrified me. I took them for a drive and we had a long talk. I promised them that I would never, ever leave them. I ended it with a work colleague, broke my lease, and had my friend help me move everything back home. I committed to working things out. I still loved my wife, I just wanted the animosity between her and my family to cease. They didn't have to like each other, just be civil. Now I had to deal with my infidelity and the girl from work. Although we never had intercourse, hell, I never even removed my clothes, it didn't matter, I cheated. We started couples counseling, and I revealed my 2 previous indiscretions. For the next couple of years, I endured daily reminders of what a piece of shit I was. Vindictive, venomous, stinging reminders of the dirty lying dog I was. I believed it all, too. Repeatedly pumped for details, demanded to justify my lack of a soul. She told all of her family and friends everything. She didn't think she could ever trust me again. This had become my burden to bear, I told myself, so long as I wanted to keep my promise to my girls. My friend, who had helped me move with the apartment, still came around from time to time, and my kids were close friends with his kids. Although always eager to knock me back down a couple of notches, my wife became particularly vicious with her words toward me when he was there. This escalated over months. My friend and I lived 5 minutes from each other, so it was never a surprise for him to come by and drop off this or that. But one day I came home, he and my wife were sitting outside talking, and he just had a strange look on his face. I would characterize it as part surprise, part guilt. The next time he came over, it was to show me his new Harley. My wife had never ridden on a Harley, and she asked if I minded if he took her for a ride. I said sure, no problem. They were gone for an hour. Yeah, not the ride I had in mind. Now my suspicions are up. So, I start asking her some questions, and get told it's my guilty conscience. Maybe I'm screwing around on her again. I'm the scumbag cheater, not her, etc. Soon after, I was downloading the pics off our digital camera, and I see a picture of the two of them sitting on the tailgate of his truck parked in the middle of our front yard. The pic was taken from inside the house, so I asked my 8-year-old daughter if she knows anything about it. All she said was, "I took it, Daddy." Tony has been coming over a lot lately. Not even a month later, our two families were taking the kids on a river float trip, and had the cabins already reserved. So, I keep my mouth shut, and play along. The final night, the kids went to bed, and we 3 adults were sitting on the outdoor deck talking. My wife was a little tipsy, and starts in about cheaters and what an asshole I am. She then shifts gears and insists that I start drinking. At first, I decline, but she seems genuinely irritated, so I grab a beer and pretend to imbibe. After several beers stealthily poured out, we move inside, and I call it a night. I head to the bedroom and silently lie down in the pitch black, listening to every word. The banter and laughs gradually diminish to whispers. Then I hear the smooching sound of kisses. Heart now racing, I silently rise from the bed and glide over to the door. As I step around the corner, he is sitting with legs spread, and she is standing between them, leaning over, lips locked. I can distinctly recall the French kissing motion of their bulging, undulating cheeks. The look on his face was priceless, especially as I strode over to the table and picked up my bag containing my pistol. She immediately began mumbling about trying to find something as she darted out the door onto the deck. I slept that night with the pistol in hand pressed flat against my chest. The drive home with the kids the next morning was deafening silent. Once we returned home, I began some detective work, and discovered from our phone bill that they had been texting each other daily for 8-9 months, up to 600 texts and 30 pics per month. I couldn't see any of the texts or pics, which is probably for the better. God knows what they were doing in my house while I was at work, but I know too. I'm sure you would disagree after reading all of this, but I'm not a complete moron. As to my initial reaction, aside from the obvious devastating sadness and betrayal from both wife and supposed longtime friend, was surprisingly relief. As you can imagine, the subject of her glaring hypocrisy immediately silenced her vitriol, so I am no longer subject to that verbal abuse. Listening to her make lame excuses for her behavior, particularly to our marriage counselor, after so many sessions of ripping me to shreds, I was drowning in schadenfreude. Honestly, I have yet to overcome it, but I'm working on it. I have a great relationship with my daughters, and that is all that matters to me now. I blame both of the women, and am now borderline misogynist, but mostly I blame myself for putting up with that childish crap for all that time. r/surviving infidelity. I was in military when my wife cheated behind my back. MW, throwaway account. Not my real name. My ex-wife decided she didn't want to be married anymore, but waited to tell me until I got off of the ship in Yokosuka after a 6-month deployment to the Indian Ocean. Her affair started somewhere in the middle of my deployment, and I suspected it because her letters had become empty of emotion, and she missed my birthday by a couple of months. I became just another sailor who was cheated on, while she became service to the 7th Fleet. I lived in the apartment when not on the ship, and she would come in late at night and leave early in the morning. Like many other sailors before me, I got bombed and stayed that way for about a month. I was barely crawling to the ship each morning, then often being released at noonish by my sympathetic boss, thanks Dennis, to attend various medical, dental and admin appointments. These were mostly held at the Popeye bar on the Honcho. A couple of days after our real split, I gave her open-ended plane ticket back to her and told her I was changing the locks on a certain Friday. She flipped out, telling me that she wouldn't have anywhere to stay. Stay with your boyfriend. He doesn't have any money, he's only an E4. That's funny, so am I, and I don't have any money either. GTFO, that was the end of that. I went back to the States to a ship in San Diego, checking aboard badly hungover, the same morning that Challenger blew up. I didn't look her up or try to find her for 30 years. Out of curiosity, I contacted her a few years ago to see what happened in the years since. I have to admit that I felt a little bad for her after we talked. She had nearly ruined her life for several years after we split up. In the interim, I had wished for very bad things to happen to her, never believing that it would come true. She got addicted to drugs, went jobless, kicked out of her parents' home, and had an illegitimate child. During that time, I lived in a bottle for another couple of years, then re-enlisted and bought a 282 Columbia sailboat with my first bonus. Things started looking up, and I met a beautiful California girl who already had a 6-year-old son by a previous marriage. Sadly, that meant that the boat had to go, but small sacrifice in the end. I married the California girl, and we bought a duplex. I adopted that beautiful boy, and we made more beautiful babies together. We are still together 33 years later. I have a ton of smart, beautiful, fantastic grandchildren from my first son, who all love me and call me Grandpa. 3 more, and more on the way from our other children together. The best revenge really is living well. Fortunately for my ex, after a few years, she grew up, cleaned up and made up with her parents. Her father eventually found her a good man who would marry her and help raise her child. I am sometimes haunted by how she had wanted us to make a baby together before I went on deployment, but in the end, we decided to wait until I returned home. Had we decided to go ahead with it, I probably would not have ever gotten a chance to know my own child, like so many sailors, due to my ongoing military commitments. And then there was the fact that she had not yet outgrown her inner slut. I fault myself equally, taking a young woman out of her element and dropping her into an all-too-adult world, far away from her family and safety net. But there is nothing to say that the train wreck would not have happened anyway. Having an inner slut didn't help. I was already aware that she getting drunk and high with her former high school buddies only a month after I left for Japan. Ask anyone. Being a military wife is one of the lowliest jobs in the world, and some women like her aren't cut out for it. But so many more are, as evidenced by those marriages that do survive the life. My real wife understood that we both had to work at our marriage, had to trust and be faithful to each other while we were separated. These days, 33+ years later, I wish my ex well. We don't stay in touch, but I miss the beautiful brown-eyed girl with the cowboy hat and boots that I knew back in Fort Worth, not the bitch I knew in Japan.